Hey guys, it's towniesimbuilds here, and welcome to our special Valentine's Day edition of Sims 4 Real Lore. In this series, we explore interesting destinations from around the world, steeped in history, mystery, and sometimes a little bit of spookiness. And as you can tell from the title of today's video, we are looking at the fantastical and somewhat tragic past of the Bled Island Church. Now, as a quick overview, Bled Island Church is located on Lake Bled, and Lake Bled is located within the Central European country of Slovenia. Now, this is a very idyllic location. It definitely is something out of a fairy tale. And with that said, a lot of sources actually claim the Bled Island Church to be a site of true Slovenian fairy tale itself. Now, as a quick note, the Bled Island Church actually goes by several different names, used by both locals and tourists alike. It is currently known as the Church of the Assumption of Mary. However, some also call it the Church of the Mother of God on the Lake. And also, in regards to a more interesting legend, it is sometimes referred to as the Church of the Lady of the Lake. And I'll definitely get to that legend very shortly. Now, beginning with the origins of Bled Island, there are two very interesting fairy tales regarding how it came to be. In the first tale, it is a literal fairy tale regarding a large community of fairies that used to live within the valley. Now, at this time, Lake Bled obviously did not exist. It was a large, sprawling meadow filled with grass, and within the grass blades, the fairies did call this place home. Now, unfortunately for our happy fairies, their time did end when certain intrusive neighbors did come into the meadow, and these neighbors came in the form of shepherds. Now, obviously the shepherds did bring their livestock. I could imagine they would be sheep or goats, for example, and upon using this land to graze, the animals did consume a lot of the grass. So, unfortunately for the fairies, they saw a lot of their home destroyed, and they did become somewhat agitated. Supposedly, the fairies did contact the farmers and the shepherds, requesting that they would move their livestock away and leave their home to be safe and undisturbed, but alas, the shepherds did not listen. While this did bother the fairies, they did try to coexist with the humans, but unfortunately, there was an accident that occurred one night. Now, within the meadow, there was supposedly a stone or a small mound where the fairies loved to dance. And one night, unfortunately, a young fairy did fall from the rock while the sisters were dancing. Now, unfortunately for the fairy that fell, she did make impact on the hard soil, no longer cushioned by the foliage, the grass, or flowers that used to be within that meadow. And upon doing so, she injured either her ankle or her leg. And at this point, the fairies had had enough. The next morning, the fairies did decide to take drastic measures in order to protect their community. Using their powers, they were actually able to summon water from various sources around the valley, pulling from other lakes, rivers, creeks, essentially any source of water they could find, flooding the valley entirely. However, there was an exception to the flooding, and that was in fact the small mound that they were dancing upon. Now, naturally, as a result, the shepherds were forced to move out of the now flooded meadow, bringing all of their livestock with them. And thus, Bled Island was officially created. Now, like I mentioned, there is also a variant to this story as well. And unfortunately, this story does, again, once more, have very intrusive shepherds being a major issue. However, in this tale before the lake formed and Bled Island formed, there was essentially a small church or chapel located within the very center of the valley. Now, unfortunately, the shepherds, once again, were not very keen on respecting this property, having their animals graze and eat the grass surrounding the area of the church. And as a result, God was not very happy with this fact. In order to protect the land, they then proceeded to flood the valley, much like the fairies, leaving only the church surrounded by a very small island, shielding it from the shepherds and the animals once more. Now, with its very magical and mythical origins, Bled Island would continue to have a very spiritual impact on the peoples living on it. Now, among these peoples were the ancient Celtics and even the ancient Romans. However, by the 6th century, the Slavic peoples did inhabit the area surrounding Lake Bled. Now, originally the Slavs actually migrated from regions north and south of what would be modern-day Slovenia. Now, at this point, you're probably wondering why I called the Bled Island Church the Love Church or the Church of Love. However, the Slavic beliefs were very central in how this came to be. Now, the Slavics themselves were pagans. They were a very polytheistic people, believing in multiple different gods and goddesses. Now, for reference, a lot of people compare Slavic mythology to that of the Greek or Norse mythology, with several similar counterparts between their different deities. Much akin to that of Greek or Norse mythology, a lot of the gods in Slavic lore also represented duality. We had gods representing light and dark, birth and death, order and chaos, etc. Now, according to historycooperative.org, there were three major gods within Slavic lore. The first one being Perun, god of thunder and lightning, and often attributed as god of war due to his immense power. We also have Vels or Veles, the god of deceit and mischief, who was also the ruler of the Slavic underworld. Third is 𝗧𝗛𝗛𝗏, the god of fire and metalwork, and also attributed as the sun god. Supposedly, he used his celestial hammer to forge the sun, and upon doing so entered a long slumber. Now, as a quick note, this is just a very small sampling of the diverse range of gods and goddesses within Slavic culture itself. However, there is one goddess in particular that is very heavily tied to Bled Island. And if you haven't guessed it already, it is in fact the goddess of love. The Slavic people, upon migrating onto Bled Island, did in fact build a temple for the pagan goddess known as 𝗧𝗛𝗏. Now, obviously 𝗧𝗏 represents love, but she also represents spring and fertility. Roughly, her name in Slavic actually translates to the word life. Now, among Western and Southern Slavic peoples, she is also sometimes referred to as Vida, and as many of you may know, this is also the same word for life in Latin and modern-day Spanish. In terms of appearance, she usually is depicted as a very beautiful woman, either presented nude or fully robed. She also usually carries an ear of wheat, fruits or flowers within her hands, usually adorned with a crown bearing natural elements as well. Now, apart from representing spring, fertility, and love, 𝗧𝗏 also had a very important purpose in Slavic beliefs. It is said that 𝗧𝗏 was actually a guide to souls after death, guiding many morally deserving souls into the Slavic equivalent of heaven. Now, with the existence of a Slavic equivalent to hell, 𝗧𝗏 had a lot of work on her hands. On one side, she brought moral souls to heaven, but on the other side, she also dealt with souls who were recently cleansed and reforged, allowing them a chance at new life and reincarnation here on Earth. So, for these reasons, it is very clear why the Slavic people devoted an entire temple to the goddess herself. Unfortunately for us, this temple existed 1400 years ago, and with the history of Bled Island itself, unfortunately there is no trace of the original temple, nor is there any record or depiction of it anywhere else. For those reasons, I did want to include some kind of photo reference, and the image I'm going to share with you is in fact a Slavic pagan temple depicted in Norway. So this is just a rough idea of what the temple could have looked like, but we will get into what happened to the temple very shortly. Unfortunately for the Slavic people living on Bled Island, they would eventually be overtaken by the invading Christians, and roughly by the year of 745 AD, their tribe would then fall. Now, upon discovering this temple, it is noted that the Christians were not very keen on its existence. The temple was founded upon pagan beliefs, and because they contradicted with those of the Christian faith, the entire temple was actually destroyed. In its place, however, we will see the very beginnings of the Bled Island Church, albeit it does look extremely different from what it started as. At this point, however, the Christians do in fact create a new chapel and devote it to the Virgin Mary. Now, as a super concise overview of the church moving forward, it definitely saw a lot of changes in its construction and its architectural style. Now, as crazy as it sounds, the church actually endured 2 earthquakes and even a lightning strike, hitting the very bell tower itself. From the beginning, it started as a very early Romanesque design, then transitioned into a more Gothic style, and eventually into a more Baroque style, which is in fact very similar to how it appears today. Now, even with these changes in the evolution of Bled Island Church, there is one legend that remains dominant to this very day, and it is in fact the tale of the sunken bell. Our story takes place roughly in the medieval ages and centers around Bled Castle. As a quick note, Bled Castle still does exist to this very day. It is a pretty large cliffside estate and does overlook Bled Island itself. It was constructed roughly in the year of 1011 AD and was once the residence of a woman named Poliksena. Poliksena, also dubbed the Lady of the Lake, also lived there with her husband by the name of 𝗪𝗛𝗏, roughly in the year of 1500 AD. At this time, 𝗪𝗛𝗏 was described as the leaseholder and administrator of Bled Castle, and unfortunately for the common folk, he was not really the best man in town. Many reports say that 𝗪𝗏𝗏 was a very oppressive man, usually encroaching upon the rights of the peasants living in the area. Now, over time, there were lots of problems, there were lots of complaints, and people unfortunately were being very fed up. It was reported that the common folk did in fact send their complaints to both the bishop and the current king at the time. And unfortunately for 𝗪𝗪𝗏, there would be a very mysterious and tragic end to his tale. After some time passes in the year of 1500 AD, 𝗪𝗪𝗏 actually goes missing. There is no body, there is no clear whereabouts as to where he is or what he has done, and he never returns to Bled Lake. Over the years, there was a lot of speculation as to what truly happened to 𝗪𝗪𝗏. On one side, people believe that outlaws were responsible for his death, taking his life in order to steal his riches. On the other hand, however, there was a belief that the commoners truly had enough and did in fact take justice in their own hands. Either way, either reason, unfortunately his wife Poliksena is now a widow. Struck by grief and tragedy, she is very distraught and she doesn't know what to do moving forward. Now, while she is in a great period of mourning, Poliksena actually makes a very drastic move. She proceeds to gather all the gold and silver she can find throughout the castle, hidden in different chests that her husband had. Now, upon doing so, she then orders a blacksmith to create a large bell, melting all of these precious metals into this one object. It is said that Poliksena actually wanted this bell delivered to the church on Bled Island, where the bell would actually toll for her husband eternally. Now, fortunately for Poliksena, she does have the bell completed, and the bell is ready to be transported onto the island itself. However, the tragedy of Poliksena yet again prevails. While the bell is being transported on a boat to Bled Lake Island, unfortunately the crew is caught in the middle of a bad storm. And within that storm, unfortunately, the boat, the crew, and the bell all perish together. Now, upon hearing this news, Poliksena is now absolutely devastated. And at this point in our story, Poliksena makes the very hard decision to leave Lake Bled for good. Now, upon doing so, reports say that she actually heads to Rome, Italy, where she joins the convent and becomes a nun. Now, fortunately for her, there is a little interesting twist of fate. Supposedly, Poliksena tells her whole story to the Pope, including the strange disappearance of her husband and the fate of the bell that she tried to create. Now, being sympathetic to her story, the Pope actually decides to take action, and as a result has a new bell recast, remade, and delivered to Bled Island Church. Reports say that the new bell was actually completed in the year of 1534 and is in fact installed on Bled Island Church today and is in fact in the steeple itself. Although Poliksena's story is mostly a tragic one, the power and meaning behind the bell is still a very important part of Bled Island lore. Many reports say that the Pope actually put a very strong blessing on the bell, giving it the power to grant wishes and even make prayers come true. For that reason, many tourists and residents alike call this the wishing bell, and this is in fact the bell that was made on Poliksena's behalf. Now, if you do visit the chapel on Bled Island today, you will be able to ring the bell yourself. For a small fee, you can actually enter the chapel or altar area, where the long rope hanging from the steeple is there for you to pull. Once you pull the rope, you should then be able to make your prayer or wish, and hopefully it does in fact come true. Now, according to local lore, there are two major rules that have to come into play in order for your prayer or wish to come true. The first rule is that you must have faith in God, and the second rule is that you can only make one wish or prayer while ringing the bell itself. Apart from the lore surrounding the Pope's bell, there is actually a lot of significance placed on the actual bell that sunk many years ago. In fact, Lake Bled actually has a full-on annual tradition, taking place every year on December 25th, aka Christmas Day. Now, if you are in fact on Bled Island during this day, you will definitely see quite a crowd along the shore of Lake Bled, and they will be watching a very interesting spectacle unfold. On this day, there is typically a team of divers who bring their own version of the sunken bell. Now, quite obviously, this is not a real bell. This bell is seemingly constructed from different wireframes and different tube lightings as well. So, as the divers descend, the light from the bell still emanates through the surface. Now, as a positive twist to Poliksena's tale, I do believe that the bell is also retrieved. So upon bringing it to the lake's bottom, the divers do then bring it back to the surface and do repeat this process every year. Now, apart from the lore of the bells, I do want to mention that Bled Island as a whole has become an increasingly popular wedding destination. If you do wish to get married there, you can actually have your ceremony in the chapel itself, and according to my research, this is also the location of the wishing bell itself, so the rope attached to the steeple actually hangs right at the altar. Also, as a quick note, I did see that some sources state that you must be of a certain faith in order to get married in the chapel, so definitely contact Lake Bled just to make sure you can in fact have your ceremony there. Now, there is one final bit of lore regarding the island itself, and if you are in fact a happy couple to be who arrives at the island, you will be greeted with a very long set of stairs, and that is 99 steps to be exact. Now, the legend goes that if the groom carries the bride through all 99 steps and makes it to the very top, the couple will then be assured a long, happy marriage. Now, with all this talk of love in the air, there are still many things you can do in the Lake Bled area if you do wish to explore it. One of them is actually riding a 𝗪𝗏, which is a traditional boat similar to that of a gondola. That's actually one of the means of transportation to the island, unless you wish to swim there yourself. One of the other delicacies is actually the 𝗧𝗛𝗞𝗦 or 𝗪𝗏𝗏, which is a special cream cake that is made in the Lake Bled area. Apart from these activities, you can also visit Bled Castle, which does feature a museum and was in fact the home of Poliksena. Alright guys, and that is a wrap on all the folklore and legends of Bled Island Church. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed learning about a lot of the lore and also enjoyed the speed build as well. Overall, I had a lot of fun bringing this to life, and I do think I got the exterior fairly close to the photographs. Now, as for the insides, you guys, unfortunately I had to do a lot of freestyling, given that there weren't really clear shots inside each of these different buildings. Like always, this is a no CC, no mod, and limited pack build, and will be available on the Sims 4 gallery for download if you do wish to add it into your game. With that said, I'll leave you guys with the final cinematic shots of the build, and of course the lot specs for you guys to look at as well. As always, this has been 𝗧𝗛𝗏𝗏𝗡𝗚 signing off. Thank you so much for watching, guys.